All right, so we're back again today for some beef bites. I'm Whitney Carmen. I'm the ag agent in Grayson County.
Evan Tate, I'm the ag agent in Hancock County.
All right. So we're going to discuss a few options as far as beef quality assurance is concerned in handling our cattle through the chute. We don't get our cattle up but a few times a year, but that's probably the most time that we're going to spend with them. And so we want to make sure that it is smooth and easygoing as possible. So Evan, let's talk about the system that we have here. You have a system that is mechanical, but there are all different kinds of options. So let's talk about that for a second.
So, I think one of the things that we really need to understand, like Whitney said, a lot of us, we're only going to work cows through a chute a couple of times a year. For those of us in the purebred thing, we're actually in the chute once a week with something. I mean, it's just, and so when we start going out and we look at pricing chutes and whatnot, we need to keep those things in mind. How much are we going to use those things? What kind of space are we going to have? How big our cows are? We'll talk about that here in a minute. And then obviously, how many times are we going to use it? When we sit down and we start drawing these things out, here in Kentucky, a lot of them are just like this. They get put in what used to be a tobacco barn. Okay, tobacco barn are notorious for having posts everywhere, and so we don't have that clear floor plan, and so we've got to use some ingenuity here. For one, I'm all about saving money where I can. Okay, I think there's places that we should save money, and then there's places that I think that we should probably invest some. And so we'll work through a little bit of that to get started. But when we sit down and we really start drawing it out, we need to keep two things in mind. One, we need to make it safe and ergonomic for the cattle, yes. Right? Mm-hmm. Equal to that, we need to make it safe and ergonomic for us.
Right.
If it stresses us, it stresses the cattle. If you're stressed, the cows will be stressed. And so that's what we're trying to do is not stress does a couple of things, right? One, it decreases the weight gain for that particular day. Two, it actually compromises the immune system. And three, it probably puts us in a position where we're not in a safe location. And so if we can do away with all three of those things and make it a really easy transition for those cattle, it'll be easy for us. So I thought we'd just talk about a few things that we've done here that are cheap, that a producer could kind of maybe implement in and go from there.
Well, let's talk about from the ground up.
Okay.
Because I see you've got a little bit of, you've got concrete, which is an option. There's also that we've been to the several locations that have gravel, and then you've also got some sort of fabric that you're using to help with them exiting the chute. So, what's the importance of these?
Okay. So you mentioned. Let's start with concrete. You mentioned every chute that I've ever worked with that has been on dirt or very loose rock, not have a firm foundation, has had some type of disadvantage to it as far as the mechanism goes. There's some reason maybe dirt gets jammed in the slides, a chute won't open, the head gate won't close all the way. They get dirt, they get rock, whatever else. Concrete is a very cheap investment in terms of what the chute would cost to make it a very functional deal, and it allows you to clean it better, get all the dirt out from underneath it. This one's got a set of scales under it. Allowed us to mount a set of scales underneath that chute, so it gets up off the ground a little bit. But concrete, to me, is the cheapest good investment that we can put underneath our chute. And you can texture it. We just used a rake and textured it here. But in talking with about flooring and non-slip flooring, that is the issue with a lot of concrete. If it is slick, cattle don't like it. One, we don't want the cattle to fall down. We don't want them to slip. We don't want them to hurt themselves. And actually what we found is cattle really like walking on these rubber mats. And so this is actually an old round baler belt that myself and another gentleman took us about 2 hours to put together, and we just weaved it together. A lot of times you'll see these made out of old car tires and tread off of tires, things like that. But we had belt just laying around the farm from where we just put new belts on a round baler. And so we put it down. And cows actually love it. They actually follow it. It's at a 90-degree angle there to go out to another pen, and they'll actually follow it. They won't get on the concrete. They'll follow the rubber. And this was...
It's cheap, I would assume.
Yeah, so we have about $20 in bolts and nuts on it, and everything else that's laying there we were tripping over in the farm shop. So.
Well, and that's this is a really good way to be resourceful with what you have, but there are also ways that there are other types of products that you can purchase that are like geotech fabric that you can use or that have padding, and we've got a list of those on our extension website, but those are all good options as far as non-stick surface or non-slip surfaces that you can use for your cattle.
Absolutely. The main thing is, when cattle exit the chute, one, we don't want them in a temperament to where they leave on a fast pace anyway. But one of the things that we found is when they step out onto this, they do go slowly, and it is more comfortable to them. It's, but like I said, $20, and it made our life a lot easier here. So if you have a cow that needs some type of quick veterinary intervention, and we take her to the barn and our chute's not functional, that causes a lot of headache. So I want something to protect my chute to where it's not rusted in between those few times that we've used it for the year, or there's not something that's laying on it, or it doesn't have mud up in it. I want to be able to put that cow in the chute right then when I need to, and do whatever needs to be done. And so I would look, it's not a requirement, but I would really look at trying to put something over the top of it.
And the good thing is that there's a lot of tobacco settlement money and county ag investment money that is available for producers in order to get that. That's a qualifying project. And so, look into that. If that's something that is going to get you to the next step, then that's a great investment to make.
You bet.
All right. So you're in an old tobacco barn, and we've got a little bit of width between our chutes. So, when we're determining how we're going to set up our facilities and where we're going to run our cattle through, that's a lot of times what I get questions about is how to run them through and where to set our chute at in our building.
The biggest problem that I've run into on producers' farms is that, like we said, tobacco barns and sheds have a lot of posts in them. So a lot of producers want to use that good solid post to put their alleyways down, and what it ends up doing is it limits the access to the chute from both sides. If a cow were to get down one way or the other, she has to come out the side. Maybe it's a side that we can't get her out. And on top of that, if I only have access to one side and she has a foot problem on the other,
how are you going to get there?
Right. And how am I going to do that safely?
Right.
And so I encourage people, use some ingenuity in how, but get those chutes out in the middle of your alleyway or your gangway or your barn, so that you have full access all the way around that chute, almost 360 degrees minus the tailgate. And so find a way, and it took us a little while here trying to figure out how to make that work too, but get it out in the middle where you have full access to both sides of your chute to where you can actually use them to help those cows.
And I would encourage producers to also just go visit and see what people, and ask other producers what they like and what has worked and what hasn't, because inevitably you get something set up and there's always a change that you're going to want to look at it and maybe try to make. So if you're going to make an investment and you're going to be setting this up for long term, always ask questions and see what works for other people too.
Talking just a few things about some options that are available on chutes. This one here has a few on it that we like, but are not necessities, but things to think about as a producer's out there pricing. These chutes, this is a manual head gate, and so you can buy an automatic head gate. Those work really well. It's a consumer preference at some point. Oftentimes I work cattle by myself. And if an automatic head gate doesn't catch, the cow can be back out in the field before I get a chance to stop it, or she's backing up and hitting it. And so we chose to buy a manual head gate. We did that for a couple of reasons with this particular model. But one, if you're working cattle by yourself, it's kind of odd to think, but to me it's easier with a manual head gate than an automatic head gate. A lot of our chutes today have a neck access door. And what Whitney was talking about with BQA and hitting the right target spot on that neck, this allows you to do so safely. There's not very many chutes out there in the market today that don't have this if you're buying a new one, okay? So it's something to think about. Side access. This is a way, well, we found a couple of things. One, where we're semen checking bulls and things like that, our veterinarian's able to get in there more safely like this. We had a cow one time that didn't claim her calf, so we wanted that calf to nurse. Well, this gave us the option to put this cow in the chute and hold her there, allow that calf to get its colostrum that it needed. And so we did that a couple days until they kind of got used to one another. And so there's that. Of course, most all chutes have swing outs on them. The boards at the bottom come off so that you have access if you want. And then squeeze. There's two types of squeeze in chutes. There's a single-sided and then there's a double-sided. This is actually a double-sided. Okay, and what it means is that chute, as the name implies, squeezes from both sides. It squeezes to the middle. Okay. Single-sided squeeze works fine and are cheaper to buy. But they'll actually squeeze from one side and they'll squeeze that cow back towards, usually to the left-hand side of the chute. So if we've got a cow that's a little cantankerous in the chute, we put just a little bit of pressure to them and that usually calms them down quite well. Our next option, and this is one that working with producers, I encourage. It's not always the cheapest option out there, but it's a tool that I find I use more and more every day. And when I don't have one working with a producer on a farm somewhere, we find out just how much of a choke point not having a palpation cage actually is. It allows us full access to the backside of the cow. It doubles as a block to the alleyway to keep cows from coming in on a person if they're back there working. But if we're doing things like artificial insemination, preg checking, anything at the rear of the cow, embryo transfer, this is a necessity. And like I said, it's a few $100 option for a lot of those cheaper chutes. It probably gets a little bit more expensive than that for some of the name brand stuff. But a needed tool in my opinion. And then something that's come out over the last couple of years, I should say, or maybe even longer, is just a rear control for the head gate. These chutes, this particular brand, we can actually buy just a base chute, which is what we did. It's kind of like a pickup truck. You can buy and add on however you wish. But we added this on later after we purchased the chute and got it in here and set up. But it allows us to operate the head gate from the rear of the cow. So like we said, if you're working cows by yourself, it allows you to put pressure on the backside of the cow to push her forward into the head gate and close it at the same time. And it's a couple $100, $300 option probably on a lot of chutes. But it's certainly well worth it if you're working cattle by yourself. So this is our drop gate. It's just operated remotely from a rope up front. Couple of options that people have here. One, this is probably the cheaper of the options that we have available. The other is a slide gate or a bifold gate that we see here. Depending on the brand of chute that you were interested in, they'll have a couple of different options for that. This is the cheapest one that we had for this particular chute. And so it was a way for us to save a few dollars and add a few things up to the front of the chute to make it more user-friendly up there. So one of the things that it's easily forgotten on our chute is just doing some simple maintenance. A lot of the new chutes now have grease fittings on them. This one does. But the worst thing that we want to do is needed in a short amount of time, and it would come and the head gate be locked up, be full of dirt, something like that. So cleaning these things on a regular basis works really well. We actually coated this one with truck bed lining to prevent rust and things like that. But you can see on all the moving joints, there's grease fittings, and so a couple of times a year, we want to make sure that we're greasing these things and everything's working right, cuts down on the wear and tear, because like I said, these things are not cheap, and so we want them to last a long time. And so there again, we have a cow, let's just say that we had to pull a calf or something. We'd run her in here and then the head gate doesn't work. Well, that just complicates that situation a lot more. So if we can keep them functional, it sure saves a lot of time in the long run. All right, so one of the things that Whitney talked about a while ago was our ag development funds that we have here in Kentucky, and there's several things that those can be used for. One of those is putting scales on the farm, where we can actually weigh cattle and we understand how big our cows are, how our calves are actually growing. It's a way for us to actually calculate our performance. We can't change what we can't measure. And so scales get pretty expensive, all right? This set of scales that's under this particular chute are what I would call a no-frills scale, okay? It basically gives us a weight, and that's really about it. And that's fine. We have others now that can download stuff, use Bluetooth and download into Excel spreadsheets and do all kinds of cool things. And those are all really interesting tools and great to have if you're going to run a large number of cattle. But for this particular one, it's just a set of low bars and a pretty plain Jane readout. Okay. It's one of those things, though, you really need concrete underneath your chute to make these work right and to keep them in good form and good shape and last a long time. I've seen producers try to put them on railroad ties or 6x6s or something like that, and they work. They're probably not as accurate as they move, and then over time we notice that those things settle and kind of put things into a bind. And so even the plain Jane scales now are well over $2,000. And there again, that's a fairly sizable investment in my mind, and so we need to do those things to kind of keep them around for a long time. One of the things that we have found, especially in our area of Kentucky, come to find out, is we have a lot of lightning strikes, okay? And so we're now running surge protectors on these scales so that we don't come in one day and find that the readouts or weigh bars or any of that has been burned up. So these little surge protectors are cheap, but they save you a lot of money in the long run. Just a quick pointer for a lot of people. We never know when calves are going to be born. We never know when we're going to need a vet there. And it seems like more times than not, it's the most inconvenient time of night when those things happen. I would encourage guys to invest in just a few cheap lights. Took us 4 lights here. I think they're about $15, $20 a piece, so less than $100. And hang over top of your chute. That way that you have ample light in here in the evenings or whatever that you need. Even if you have an outdoor chute, have some way to light it. So if you do have one of those late night calls, you've got an option there to where you can actually do your job and do it well. The cheap investment, and it'll make things work a lot better.
All right, so we've talked a lot about from the head chute back, but we've not discussed yet how they get to the chute. And so let's talk a couple of minutes about how we can make a sweeping alley or a way that they get to the chute.
I think one of the things that we need to understand is we don't really have to spend a lot of money back there. We don't have to go to the store and buy one. I think with a little bit of ingenuity, some of the things that we have laying around the farm work quite well. It's just putting them in the right spot and understanding how cattle kind of move from light to dark, or from dark to light. Sharp corners, if there's anything that would cause them to balk. Just understanding a few of those little tactics as far as moving cattle go, I think helps a whole lot. This actually from the end of our chute back on this particular farm, I've got less than $500 invested in it. We had an old grain bin that we were going to tear down, and so we actually used the sides of the grain bin, or the rings of the grain bin, for our tub back there. And then we took the floor out of it and made our alleyways out of it. And so that, some old posts that we had laying around, and we've got an alleyway and a sweep that I can work by myself from the chute, and rarely do I ever have to go back and push cattle up.
And so it's important to know that you said you used grain bin sides, and so it's solid. And it is, as part of BQA and as part of working cattle, it is important to know that the less that they see, the better they're going to move. And so, as far as you are standing there and they're going to move, you want to walk past them as they're going forward to help make them move. And so if you can make your alleyway able to do that, they're going to move better for you.
You bet. Like we talked about a while ago, a lot of these are actually in old tobacco barns or old sheds. Lighting is an issue a lot of times, because we'll see light coming in from different angles, and that causes cattle to balk, or maybe it's putting them in the eye versus behind them, shining forward. And so we just, it took us a little bit to kind of figure out the lighting in this particular barn. It was, at one time, it was wood sided, and so lighting was an issue. And so we just went to Walmart and bought some $4 and $5 little floodlights, and got it to where all the light is shining in the right direction. And it works really well. And like I said, we didn't spend a lot of money into it. It took a little time to get it right. And as you work cattle through those things, you'll start to understand the issues that you'll have. But the main thing is that they're headed back the direction that they came, and there's nothing there to really want them to make them stop. And so at the end of the day, usually I can work 15 or 20 cows through at a time. In this particular barn, that's about how many we can put in and get it right. And rarely do I ever have to leave the chute. You know, cattle kind of want to follow, and they've gotten used to the system, and it works really well.
And so another issue too is the size of your alleyway. You know, you want to make sure that it's not wide. It's wide enough for especially your big cows to get through, but also not enough that they can turn around and go backwards if for some reason they balk and have an issue in the chute.
Yeah. Our alleyway here is not adjustable. Okay. You can buy adjustable alleyway sections. Those are quite expensive. I mean, but nice. Okay. And so if you're working a lot of cows through and a lot of baby calves through, and you don't want the headache of those calves trying to turn or something like that, which we have a little bit here, you know, you can certainly go out and purchase those or engineer them yourself, probably a little cheaper. But they're nice. They're just quite expensive.
Yeah, and so I think that is an option for producers, and that's based on what you all are doing on your operation. If you're working a lot of stocker calves, or if you're working a lot of small calves, an adjustable chute may be something that you're interested in. But once again, it's all based on you as a producer and what you're doing in your enterprise.
Yeah, you know, I think maintaining a good eye on your goals, and then sizing the system to the number of cattle that you have are two important things that a lot of people forget about. You know, we don't want to crowd cows, and so if we need to make it a little bit bigger, so be it. You know, the less trauma that we can put on those cattle, I think the better off we'll be.
And I also think in the grand scheme of things, when you're working cattle, working as many as you can feasibly with the help that you have at a time. Right. So you can bring up the whole herd, but have your system set up to where you can work smaller groups and run them through, because it's proven that working smaller groups at a time has been easier and more economical and safer for everybody involved.
Yeah, you bet. You know, I think one of the things that we really need to look at is, after we get that thing installed, is look at the disposition of the cattle. You know, and our cattle, if they're typically calm out in the field, and we bring them in and they're restless and they're uncomfortable, you know, we really need to find the source of that problem. Is it us, or are we being too loud, or are we acting a fool? You know, I mean, or is it the system, something that they don't like? And so it's a problem-solving venture at that point. But you know, it's something that we as ag agents, you know, that's part of our job is to work with producers to help solve those problems. So I look forward to doing that.